Welcome to the official podcast of Vienna Shadows, a secret society uncovering Vienna's hidden mysteries. Lean back and enjoy the show.
Imagine walking into a gallery, right? You're staring at this priceless golden masterpiece.
Yeah.
And you suddenly realize the gold isn't there to just look pretty. It's actually there to keep whatever is inside the painting from getting out.
Oh, man. Such a chilling thought.
Right.
Yeah.
You look at those flowing metallic curves of turn-of-the-century canvas, expecting to appreciate this safe, historical, aesthetic rebellion. But what if that framing wasn't just for display? What if the beautiful, intricate art of the early 1900s was actually like a functional, desperate cage built to trap cosmic horrors?
I mean, it completely flips the concept of art history on its head.
Yeah.
We're talking about a world where the cultural veil isn't just a metaphor. It is a literal physical barrier holding back the total collapse of reality.
Exactly. And that is exactly our mission today. Welcome to this deep dive crafted specifically for you, the game masters out there preparing to run the tabletop role-playing game, Vienna Shadows.
Which is such an amazing setting.
It really is. So we're bringing you a comprehensive audio guide to this incredibly dark jazzpunk TTRPG. We're going to unpack the hidden lore of 1920s Vienna, break down how the core game mechanics actually simulate this dread at your table.
And walk step by step through the sample adventure, too.
Yes, the golden autopsy.
Right. And my goal here is to really look under the hood of this setting. I'll be breaking down not just what the lore is, but, the underlying mechanisms of how it actually functions in this universe.
Because it's not just flavor text.
Exactly. It matters for your pacing as a game master. We want to help you create an atmosphere where academic art history and cosmic horror are just actively bleeding together.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the foundation.
Right.
Before you drop your players into this jazz punk dystopia, you really need to understand the Wiener Jugendstil.
The Viennese Art Nouveau.
Right, and the Secession artists. The source material outlines that breaking the classic academic art rules wasn't just young artists being edgy. Take Gustav Klimt, for example, the guy behind the Golden Phase. Masterpieces like The Kiss and The Tree of Life. In our world, they're celebrated for this intricate, overwhelming use of gold leaf. But in Vienna Shadows, there is a shadow truth. Klimt was secretly a master metallurgist.
The functional application of his art in this game is just fascinating. So Klimt discovered that gold leaf, when it's specifically alloyed with meteoric metals, it actually creates a physical stasis barrier.
Wow.
Yeah, so those iconic, intricate geometric mosaics, he painted the spirals, the staring eyes, the interlocking squares. They aren't decorative at all. They are highly complex binding sigils.
So they're literally doing something.
Exactly. The specific geometric angles actually trap the psychic frequencies of cosmic entities right there on the canvas. It freezes them in two-dimensional space so they just cannot bleed into the material world.
It completely recontextualizes how we look at art. Klimt's paintings are essentially beautiful gilded pressure valves on a collapsing submarine.
That's a great way to put it.
They're holding back the crushing depths of the outer void. But if Klimt was building the pressure valves, his contemporary, Egon Schiele, was painting the autopsies of the crew who couldn't handle the depths.
Which is a phenomenal analogy for game masters to use with their players, by the way. I mean, Schiele's art is historically known for these raw, emaciated, agonizingly twisted nudes.
Yeah, very unsettling stuff.
Well, in the game, his artistic vision was altered because he accidentally attuned himself to something called the unbound flesh.
And the source material notes this is actually an aspect of Shub-Niggurath. Now, for GMs familiar with standard mythos horror, this usually means, giant tentacled monsters in the woods. But how does that manifest here?
Yeah, in Vienna Shadows, Shub-Niggurath is treated more like a localized breakdown of physics.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like a gravitational distortion of flesh itself. So Schiele isn't just painting highly expressive models. He is painting human bodies that are physically warping under the immense gravitational and psychic pull of the void.
That is so dark.
Right. His paintings are literal anatomical blueprints. They chart the precise, agonizing physical degradation, the fluid dynamics of bone and muscle that happens right before a human host undergoes what the game calls a slipping of the flesh.
Which means his paintings are almost like medical x-rays of an occult disease. It's like Klimt's paintings are the high-voltage electric fences holding back Godzilla, while Schiele's are the x-rays of the people who got too close to the radiation.
Yes, exactly. And then you have Oskar Kokoschka, historically known for these frantic brushstrokes painting the raw inner psyche. In the game's lore, he is the portraitist of the id. He could visually perceive the alien passenger that nests in the human brainstem.
Okay, we should probably define what that means in this setting, because that sounds terrifying.
It is. The alien passenger is a psychic parasite. It feeds on a person's base desires, their id, and Kokoschka painted it. His famous piece, The Bride of the Wind, depicts a couple floating in this violent tempest. In the game, that is a literal rendering of two human egos being actively swept away into the dreamlands by their parasitic inner entities. And the dreamlands here aren't some fantasy realm. They are the collective subconscious being actively hijacked and weaponized.
This gives GMs such an incredible tool for horror at the table. Because the book says that looking too closely at a Kokoschka original can trigger a sympathetic resonance.
Yeah.
Like, the geometric patterns of his brushstrokes actually match the psychic frequency of the parasite, which wakes up the viewer's own inner monster just by looking at it.
And if these individual paintings act as, like, micro cages or hazards, you have to think about how it scales up. A city filled with millions of people and thousands of these dormant passengers requires a macro cage to keep everything stable.
Right.
So we have to move from the canvas to the concrete.
Which brings us to urban planning as a cult containment. Enter Otto Wagner, Vienna's premier architect and city planner. He designed the iconic imperial Stadtbahn, the metro system, the stations, the bridges. The shadow truth here is that Wagner realized Vienna was expanding directly over deep subterranean fault lines that were housing aquatic cosmic horrors.
So he engineered those gorgeous green-painted iron pavilions and massive railway bridges as geometric occult dampeners.
And I am obsessed with the mechanism behind this. It's not just magic, it's industrial.
Right.
The rhythmic transit of the heavy steam trains running through his perfectly arched tunnels acts as a massive kinetic pump. The sheer physical weight and the rhythmic expulsion of high-pressure steam physically iron out dimensional folds.
It's so cool.
It essentially pins these aquatic horrors down beneath the concrete grid of the city.
The city is literally a living, breathing machine keeping the apocalypse at bay. Wagner also directed the design of the psychiatric hospital church, the Kirche am Steinhof, which features stained glass windows designed by Kolo Moser.
Yeah, the text mentions those windows were treated with alchemical salts to filter sunlight into a sanity-locking frequency. But, how exactly does a salt window lock sanity?
Well, the alchemical salts physically bend the incoming light waves. They shift the light spectrum to perfectly counter the psychic frequency of the void.
Oh, wow.
So when that filtered light hits the retinas of the psychiatric patients in the hospital below, it essentially puts the alien parasites in their brain stems to sleep via retinal absorption.
That is brilliant.
Yeah, it prevents them from transforming into what the setting calls starving ones.
So if the city relies on this delicate transit web and specific architecture to keep horrors at bay, it makes sense that whoever controls that infrastructure basically controls reality. Which brings us to the factions fighting over it, the secret war of the robes.
And any robust TTRPG thrives on factions with conflicting ideologies.
Right.
Vienna Shadows provides this complex four-way conflict. First, you have the Black Robes. These are the chaos cultists.
The bad guys, basically.
Pretty much. They're Schiele fanatics who infiltrate avant-garde art schools, pushing students to paint using blood and void pigments. Their entire goal is to turn public art galleries into unmonitored portals.
And opposing them are the Golden Robes, made up of wealthy art collectors, conservative museum directors, and industrial magnates. They hoard Klimt's paintings, but not to preserve them.
You have to strip them.
Right. To strip the meteoric gold leaf. They forged containment armor and protective cages for their own experimental mind control transmitters.
Then we have the Crimson Robes, who treat art history as a literal science. They steal Kokoschka's early portraits and Sigmund Freud's clinical notes to extract the true names of the alien passengers inside the Viennese elite.
Looking at these notes on the Crimson Robes, I was trying to figure out how they actually extract a true name from a painting. It sounds impossible.
It requires intense cross-referencing. They map the erratic brushstrokes of Kokoschka's portraits against the behavioral text documented in Freud's psychoanalytic files.
That's wild.
Right. By finding the intersection between visual distortion and psychological trauma, they calculate the exact mathematical frequency, the true name of the parasitic entity, which gives them leverage over the host.
That is deeply unsettling, but also kind of brilliant. And finally, you have the Splinter Group. the Crimson Cracked branch. They're embedded in the Bohemian underground and among the transit workers.
Yeah, the blue-collar faction.
Exactly. They are the ones actually maintaining Otto Wagner's Stadtbahn dampeners. They use hidden graffiti tags painted in alchemical silver to repair the broken sigils on the metro arches.
They are the unsung mechanics keeping reality functional.
But here's where it gets really interesting and where I actually have to push back a bit on the faction logic. If the Crimson Cracked branch is literally saving the city by fixing the transit lines, why are they staying underground, like acting like outlaws with spray paint? Why don't they just ally with the police or the city authorities to secure funding and protection?
Well, you have to remember, in a jazzpunk dystopia, the authorities are never neutral. They are heavily influenced or outright controlled by the golden robes, the wealthy elites. The golden robes view the occult infrastructure not as a public safety necessity, but as a resource to be harvested for themselves.
Okay, so as a GM, how do you portray the police then? Because you don't want them all to just be cackling villains, right?
No, you portray them as quietly corrupted, bureaucratic, and willfully ignorant. A police captain might, look the other way when golden robe mercenaries rip up a transit dampener because his precinct just received a massive, anonymous donation from a museum board.
Classic.
Exactly. If the crack branch went to the authorities, they'd be arrested as vandals, and the dampeners would just be left vulnerable. They operate like a resistance cell because the system is actively designed to crush them. And regarding funding, they likely have to steal that alchemical silver directly from golden robe supply chains.
Oh, that creates so much friction for the players to navigate. The system is corrupt, so the saviors have to be criminals. So how does all this rich lore actually hit the table? Let's dive into the mechanics, because GMs really need actionable advice here.
For sure. The engine for Vienna Shadows is elegantly straightforward, which leaves maximum bandwidth for narrative horror. It uses a D6 roll-under system based on 4 core attributes: strength, intellect, charisma, and perception.
Okay.
And the baseline for human average is 3. So you basically want to roll equal to or under your attribute on a standard 6-sided die.
Simple enough. But the real meat of the system for GMs is the sanity threat, which they call aesthetic shock. When your players study a corrupted secessionist artwork or wander into a space warped by non-Euclidean patterns, you ask for a perception check.
Right.
And if they fail, they suffer aesthetic shock. But how do you narrate that? It can't just be, you lose a point of sanity. That's boring.
No, it is a visceral, physical reaction. It's not just getting scared, it's a cosmic flashbang. As a GM, you want to engage the senses before the visual even hits. Ask the player what their character smells. Maybe it's sharp ozone or old copper.
Oh, I like that.
Then, describe the reality around them breaking down. The cobblestones beneath their feet suddenly look perfectly, terrifyingly two-dimensional. The sky turns into flat, shimmering gold leaf, and the people around them begin to look like weeping flesh.
It is completely disorienting, and that disorientation carries mechanical weight, too. The source rules state that while suffering aesthetic shock, you lose 1 sanity, and the character takes a +1 difficulty modifier to all physical strength checks for the rest of the scene.
Which is huge.
Yeah. It simulates how debilitating it is to have your spatial reality overwritten by the void. You can barely throw a punch or force open a door because you literally can't trust your depth perception anymore.
And to fix it, you cannot just take a breather or, drink a tonic. You have to use the physical world. The countermeasure is called Wagnerian grounding. If a character is suffering from aesthetic shock, they need to get inside an official Otto Wagner Stadtbahn pavilion, like those iconic ones at Karlsplatz.
The geometric dampeners we talked about.
Exactly.
This creates incredible table dynamics. Imagine a chase scene. You're losing your mind, the walls are bleeding gold, a cultist is chasing you, and you literally have to sprint into a metro station and hug a green iron pillar to shock your brain back to normal.
That's exactly how it plays out. Once inside, the player makes an intellect check to physically brace themselves against the architecture. If they succeed, the building's specific grounding frequency surges through them. It violently re-anchors their ego to material reality and instantly cures the aesthetic shock.
It forces players to treat the city's architecture as an active game element, like an interactive tool for survival rather than just background scenery.
Right, the city is a weapon.
All of this theory is amazing, but we really need to see how a GM ties it all together in an actual session. Let's walk through the sample adventure provided in the sources. The Golden Autopsy. It perfectly connects the art, the architecture, the factions, and the mechanics.
It really does. It's structured as a tight 3-act scenario. Let's look at Act 1, the Shimmering Corpse. The investigator party gets a frantic call from a conductor at the Karlsplatz Stadtbahn station. They arrive to find a young art student dead on a bench inside the pavilion.
But her skin is entirely encrusted in a heavy, brilliant, pulsating layer of gold leaf, and the gold is slowly spreading from her skin onto the wooden bench. It immediately establishes the visual language of the game right there.
This is such a great hook.
And a successful intellect check from the players reveals she was a copyist, recently hired to restore a hidden section of Klimt's massive Beethoven frieze.
And this anomaly naturally pulls the players into Act 2, the transit sabotage. Following the trail of spreading gold leaf takes them deep into the dark subterranean rail tunnels between Karlsplatz and Kettenbrückengasse.
Ducky!
Very. Here, the GM introduces the Black Robes. The cultists have kidnapped an engineering foreman and are actively trying to dismantle one of Otto Wagner's structural iron arches in the tunnel.
Okay, so if the student was working on the frieze and the cultists are stealing iron from the metro, these two elements have to be connected. The source says they need the meteoric iron alloy from that specific arch to forge a physical key that will permanently unlock the Beethoven frieze.
Exactly.
This is where GMs can use the mechanics to build incredible tension. It's a high-stakes chase in pitch darkness. The players make perception checks to avoid stepping on electrified rails, and strength checks to physically stop the cultists from unbolting the arch, all while the kinetic pump and actual late-night steam train is bearing down on them.
It forces players to juggle environmental hazards with combat. If they secure the iron, or even if they fail and the cultists escape with it, the trail leads out of the tunnels directly to Act 3, the Symphony of the Secession. This is where the macro-level collision happens.
So what does this all mean for the climax? How do you balance all these chaotic elements at the end?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a masterpiece of encounter design. The setting is the main exhibition hall of the Secession building, right beneath its famous golden dome of laurel leaves. The main Crimson Robes have occupied the hall.
Wait, the Crimson Robes?
Yeah, they've set up massive high-powered amplifiers and are blasting a live jazzpunk waltz, specifically Freud's Last Nightmare by the artist Amora Klang, but they're playing it in reverse.
How does music unlock a painting?
Because the Beethoven frieze isn't just a painting, it's a functional musical score for the void. By playing this specific inverted waltz and aligning their instruments with the geometric patterns on the wall, the Crimson Robes are matching the resonant frequency of the binding sigils. They're literally animating the frieze.
Oh, man. So the golden sigils start glowing radioactively yellow. The giant ape-like stone monster depicted in the frieze Typhon starts to physically shift and pull itself out of the wall. And just to escalate the chaos, the Golden Robes arrive with heavy paramilitary forces. They intend to blow up the wall with explosives just to harvest the golden fragments. They're completely oblivious to the fact that blowing up the wall will destroy a cage and instantly unleash Typhon into the district.
It's a massive three-way collision. The players cannot just shoot a stone monster or fight off an entire paramilitary squad with revolvers. They have to use macro-level Wagnerian grounding. The players need to secure a loose electrical conduit from the streetcar line outside the building and physically connect it to the copper framework of the Secession Dome.
It requires a highly difficult intellect check, but the source notes the difficulty is reduced by 2 if the players allied with the Cracked Branch transit workers earlier in the campaign, which is a great callback.
A successful check sends a massive grounding pulse through the entire building's architecture. It overloads and burns out the Crimson Robes amplifiers and reseals the Beethoven frieze just before reality completely dissolves.
The stakes of this resolution give the GM a massive fulcrum for the campaign world. Because if the players succeed, the hall falls silent. The gold glow fades back into mundane paint. Typhon is just a carving again, and the Cracked Branch rewards the party with a Klimt alloy pocket mirror.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it's this sweet eldritch artifact that players can hold up to reflect gaze-based sanity attacks back at void entities.
But if they fail, the consequences permanently alter your city. The Beethoven frieze shatters. Typhon's psychic frequency erupts across the entire first district of Vienna. The whole Karlsplatz area is instantly quarantined, becoming what the game calls a golden zone.
And the sensory description for a golden zone is just brutal. Thousands of citizens are frozen in place, turned into solid gold statues, and their trapped minds are just screaming into the vacuum.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
And the Golden Robes move in to take total containment control over the area, establishing a permanent, heavily armed foothold.
It provides a devastating visual and a brutal consequence that will completely change the political and physical landscape of every future session you run.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the sources for today. Thank you for coming along on this journey through the dark jazz punk underbelly of 1920s Vienna. For all the game masters listening, I hope you see how elegantly this setting weaves art, architecture, and mechanics together to create a cohesive, terrifying experience at your table. Your players are not going to look at a museum the same way again.
They certainly won't. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder as you build your campaigns. Just a detail hidden in the implications of this world's timeline.
Ooh, lay it on us.
Well, the guide specifically states that Otto Wagner's dampening system relies on the rhythmic transit of steam trains.
Right.
It is their immense physical weight and the violent expulsion of steam acting as a kinetic pump that irons out the dimensional folds and pinning down those subterranean water horrors. But this game is set in the 1920s.
Oh, wait, the timeline. Electrification is coming.
Exactly. When those heavy, thundering steam engines are inevitably retired in the name of progress, they're replaced by quiet, efficient, lightweight electric streetcars, well, will that kinetic pump fail?
Oh, wow.
It raises a terrifying question for your overarching campaign. Is the true Dune of Vienna coming from a cult ritual in a basement, or simply from the unstoppable, quiet march of urban modernization?
This concludes today's episode. Don't forget to rate and subscribe. Until next time, Vienna Shadows, signing off.